Welcome back to our channel. In this video, we reveal some of the most valuable coins in the world, coins that collectors and investors are willing to pay thousands or even millions for. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America right now, a small copper coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, or an old coffee can in the garage. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't scream luxury. Yet collectors are willing to pay up to $921,000 for it. And here's the uncomfortable question that should stop you in your tracks. What if that coin has already passed through your hands and you never noticed? Today's story is about the 1961 Lincoln penny, a coin most people overlook, and a mistake that has turned ordinary cents into life-changing wealth. Act 1 begins with familiarity. The year is 1961. John F. Kennedy is president. America is confident, ambitious, and expanding. Millions of pennies are struck at the Denver Mint, marked quietly with a small d. They enter circulation without fanfare, mixed with pocket change, lunch money, and newspaper stands. No one suspects that among these everyday coins, a rare mint error is born, an imperfection so subtle that only time, scarcity, and demand would reveal its true power. This is how great opportunities often arrive. Not loudly, but disguised as ordinary. Now here's where excitement starts to rise. Certain 1961 Lincoln pennies were struck with high-value minting errors that elite collectors aggressively hunt today. We're talking about anomalies created at the moment of striking, when metal, pressure, and human oversight collide. These errors are not damage. They are not wear. They are fingerprints of the minting process itself, and collectors treat them like fine art. When preserved in top condition and authenticated, these pennies have reached market values as high as $921,000. That's not luck. That's demand meeting rarity. Let me pause you right here with a quick reality check. Be honest. If I handed you a penny right now, would you even look at it twice? Most people wouldn't. And that's exactly why fear creeps in. Because the biggest financial regrets in life don't come from risks we took. They come from opportunities we ignored. The thought that a six-figure coin could be hiding in plain sight is unsettling. Isn't it? Good. That discomfort means you're paying attention. Act 2 is where authority takes the stage. The numismatic market is not driven by hype. It's driven by scarcity, condition, and verified errors. High-grade 1961 pennies with specific mint anomalies are in extraordinary demand among serious collectors, auction houses, and private investors. These buyers aren't emotional. They're strategic. They know that as time passes, fewer of these coins survive in elite condition. Supply shrinks. Demand intensifies. Prices climb. This is why rare pennies are no longer just collectibles. They're alternative assets. Here's a question that resets your attention for a second. What sounds more realistic? Winning the lottery or discovering you already own something valuable? Exactly. One depends on luck. The other depends on awareness. And awareness is free. That's the quiet power of coin collecting. Wealth doesn't always require more income. Sometimes it requires better vision. The 1961 Lincoln penny sits at a unique crossroads in American coinage. It's old enough to be scarce in pristine condition, modern enough to be widely overlooked, and valuable enough to command fierce competition when the right example appears. When one surfaces at auction, collectors move fast. They know hesitation costs money, that urgency is real and it's growing. Every year, more people enter the rare coin market. Every year, fewer top-tier coins remain available. Time is not neutral here. It favors the prepared. Let's add a moment of levity, because even wealth has a sense of humor. Imagine telling someone you paid off your house because of a penny. Not a stock tip. Not crypto. Not real estate. A penny. The smallest denomination, delivering one of the biggest surprises. That's not just funny. It's poetic. And it's exactly why these stories captivate seasoned Americans who understand that smart money often moves quietly. Act 3 is where everything connects and where urgency sharpens. Right now, across the United States, people are actively searching through inherited collections, old rolls, and forgotten jars. Some are discovering nothing. Others are uncovering extraordinary value. The difference isn't intelligence. It's action. The market doesn't reward intention. It rewards movement. Coins like the 1961 D Lincoln penny don't announce themselves. They wait to be recognized. If you're watching this, it's not by accident. It's a signal, a reminder that wealth can exist in places you've been taught to ignore. Fear says, what if I already missed it? Excitement says, what if it's still there? And urgency says, check now before someone else does. Those three emotions, when aligned, lead to decisive action. And decisive action is where financial stories change. The truth is simple and empowering. You don't need millions to find millions. You need knowledge, timing, and the willingness to look closer than everyone else. The 1961 D Lincoln penny represents more than a coin. It represents a mindset. A mindset that understands value isn't always loud, flashy, or obvious. Sometimes it's copper-colored, 1 cent in denomination, and nearly $1 million in potential. So before you dismiss your change, your drawers, or your past collections, remember this. History has already proven that ordinary objects can create extraordinary outcomes. The only remaining question is whether you'll be the person who looks or the person who walks away. Because in a market this hot, with demand this strong, the next discovery won't wait forever. What if I told you that a single penny, yes, one quiet copper coin you may have ignored for decades, has stunned collectors and shaken auction rooms with a value reaching as high as $945,000. No lottery ticket, no risky investment, just a 1969 Lincoln penny with a small but powerful letter beneath the date. Before you laugh and say, come on, it's just a penny, pause for a moment, because the biggest financial opportunities often hide inside the smallest details, and history proves that those who notice first are the ones who win. This story begins in 1969, a year of change in America, when the U.S. Mint was producing millions of Lincoln cents every single day. Most of them were ordinary, forgettable, spent and lost without a second thought. But a tiny fraction of these coins were different. Struck at the Denver Mint and marked with a bold D, a rare and powerful minting anomaly slipped through quality control. No alarms, no headlines, just a quiet mistake. One that would later become one of the most talked about Lincoln penny errors in modern numismatic history. And here's the unsettling question. How many people spent one of these coins on coffee without ever knowing? Now let's reset your attention for a second. Quick question. If a penny fell on the ground in front of you today, would you bend down to pick it up, or would you walk past it? Most people wouldn't even slow their stride. And that's exactly why collectors, dealers, and serious wealth builders think differently. They understand that value is not about size. It's about rarity, demand, and timing. The 1969 D Lincoln penny error checks all three boxes, and that's what turns pocket change into generational money. In Act 2 of this story, the truth gets exciting and a little uncomfortable. As collectors began closely examining 1969 Denver pennies, whispers started circulating about unusual characteristics. Doubling where it shouldn't exist. Subtle but undeniable anomalies in the strike. Details that separated these coins from the millions of ordinary cents flooding circulation. When authenticated examples surfaced, the reaction was electric. Demand didn't grow slowly, it exploded. High-end collectors don't chase coins like this casually. They move with urgency, because they know once these pieces disappear into private collections, they rarely come back. Here's where fear quietly enters the room. Fear of missing out. Fear of having already owned one and spent it. Fear of realizing that life-changing value might still be sitting in a jar, a drawer, or an old coffee can in your home. And let's be honest, how many times have you inherited coins and thought, I'll check these later? Later is how fortunes slip away. The market doesn't wait, and neither do serious buyers. What drives the value of the 1969 D Lincoln penny error isn't hype, it's competition. When a verified example appears, collectors don't negotiate emotionally. They compete aggressively. This is not a slow, sleepy market. This is a high-demand arena fueled by scarcity and prestige. A coin like this doesn't just represent money. It represents status, history, and proof that the owner recognized opportunity where others saw nothing. And yes, when examples have reached values approaching $945,000, It's because multiple buyers decided that owning this coin mattered more than the price. Let's interrupt the seriousness for a second. Imagine explaining to your younger self that one day, a penny could be worth more than a luxury home. You'd probably laugh. Yet here we are. This is the strange, beautiful irony of numismatics. The smallest denomination can carry the biggest surprise. And the people who win in this world aren't gamblers, they're observers. As we move into Act 3, the meaning of this story becomes crystal clear. The 1969 Lincoln penny error is not just about a coin. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. And sometimes it's already yours, you just haven't looked closely enough yet. Right now, across the United States, people are searching rolls, boxes, and collections with renewed urgency. Because once the market recognizes a rarity, it never goes backward. Demand strengthens, supply tightens, prices climb, and the window of opportunity narrows. This is why experienced collectors act decisively. They don't wait for permission. They don't assume tomorrow will be the same as today. So here's the empowering truth. If you own old pennies, especially from the late 1960s, you are not holding spare change. You are holding potential. Potential for discovery. Potential for transformation. Potential for a story that begins with curiosity and ends with financial freedom. And in a world where most people are distracted, the simple act of paying attention can separate the ordinary from the extraordinary. The real question isn't whether coins like the 1969 Lincoln penny error exist. They do. The real question is whether you're willing to look before someone else does. Because history rewards those who recognize value early, and punishes those who assume small things can't change their lives. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America right now, a small copper coin is sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, or an old coffee can in the garage. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and yet, it carries a value that could rewrite a family's financial future. What if I told you that a single 1973 Lincoln penny, with no mint mark, has stunned collectors and crossed the astonishing market value of $745,000? And here's the most unsettling part. Millions of people have already handled this coin without realizing what they were holding. Could you be one of them? This story begins in 1973, a year when gas was cheap, televisions were bulky, and the U.S. Mint struck billions of Lincoln cents for everyday use. No fanfare, no headlines, just another year, another penny. But history has a funny habit of hiding its treasures in plain sight. Among those billions of coins, a handful were born different, slightly flawed, quietly imperfect. And today, those imperfections are exactly what make them priceless. Funny how life works, isn't it? The thing everyone once ignored becomes the very thing everyone wants. Now let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. When was the last time you actually looked at your pennies? Not glanced. Looked. Most people don't. Pennies are dismissed as pocket clutter, spare change, almost an inconvenience. But collectors know better. Serious collectors understand that rarity doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. And the 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is one of those whispers that turned into a roar. What makes this penny extraordinary is not just its age, but the mysterious errors tied to its production. During that era, subtle mistakes occurred at the mint, planchet issues, striking anomalies, alignment irregularities that slipped past quality control. These were never meant to exist, yet they did. And today, high-grade examples with rare errors have become some of the most aggressively sought-after coins in the entire Lincoln cent series. Demand isn't slowing down. It's accelerating. Here's where the fear kicks in, and it should. Every year, countless valuable coins are lost forever. Spent at gas stations, dropped into tip jars, rolled up and sent back to banks. Imagine unknowingly trading a coin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for a cup of coffee. That's not fiction. That's reality. And it's happening more often than people are comfortable admitting. A little uncomfortable, isn't it? But let's shift gears, because this is where excitement enters the picture. The beauty of coin collecting, and especially Lincoln pennies, is accessibility. You don't need to be wealthy to start. You don't need insider connections. Some of the most valuable discoveries were made by everyday people who simply paid attention. Retirees, working professionals, inherited collections from parents or grandparents, ordinary Americans who decided to look twice instead of once. Act 2 of the story is about awakening. The moment you realize that old pennies are not just metal but opportunity. The 1973 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny has become a symbol of that awakening. As more collectors compete for fewer verified examples, prices rise. Auction records climb. Private sales intensify. The market doesn't ask if you're ready, it moves whether you participate or not. And right now, this coin is in exceptionally high demand. Let's pause for a quick pattern interrupt. Be honest, how many pennies do you think are sitting in the average American home? Hundreds? Thousands? Now here's the fun question. What if just one of them changed everything? Suddenly, that jar on the shelf doesn't look so boring, does it? The most successful collectors think differently. They don't chase trends, they recognize them early. They understand that scarcity plus demand equals power. And the 1973 Lincoln penny, especially with no mint mark and rare error characteristics, sits squarely in that power zone. Wealth, in many cases, doesn't come from working harder. It comes from seeing what others overlook. Act 3 is where urgency takes center stage. We are living in a moment where tangible assets are being reevaluated. Coins are no longer just collectibles, they're financial instruments. As more people move into the rare coin market, competition intensifies. And once top-tier examples are locked into private collections, they rarely come back out. When they do, prices don't go down, they leap. This is why timing matters. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. The difference between curiosity and action is often the difference between regret and reward. The people who win in this space are not gamblers. They're informed. They're decisive. They understand that opportunity has an expiration date. Picture the lifestyle shift for a moment. Financial breathing room, security, the ability to choose how you spend your time instead of being trapped by necessity. All sparked by a single decision to take old coins seriously. That's not hype. That's history repeating itself over and over for those willing to pay attention. And here's the final thought to carry with you. Wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives disguised as something small, old, and underestimated. The 1973 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny is proof of that truth. Somewhere, someone is holding one right now, completely unaware of its potential. The only question left is simple and powerful. Imagine this for a moment. You're holding a simple brown penny. It's been sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, maybe even your pocket for decades. No shine, no drama, just 1 cent. But what if that ordinary-looking 1975 Lincoln penny, no mint mark, no fanfare, was silently worth more than most homes in America? What if the difference between your current life and generational wealth was hiding in plain sight, overlooked by millions, but not by the people who understand what to look for? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may permanently change how you see your spare change and your future. This is not hype. This is not fantasy. This is the world of rare U.S. coin errors, where knowledge turns sense into six-figure assets, and where the 1975 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny has emerged as one of the most talked-about modern treasures in American numismatics. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Every year, thousands of these coins are spent, lost, or ignored, simply because the owner didn't realize what they had. The question is not whether rare coins exist. The question is whether you'll recognize one before it slips through your fingers forever. Let's rewind for a moment to 1975. America was changing. Inflation was rising. Confidence was fragile. The U.S. Mint was under enormous production pressure, striking billions of pennies to keep up with demand. And when pressure rises, mistakes happen. That's where opportunity is born. Among the Philadelphia-struck Lincoln cents of 1975, coins that naturally carry no mint mark, a small number were produced with extraordinary errors. Errors so subtle they escaped detection for years. Errors so rare that when authenticated today, they ignite bidding wars among elite collectors and private investors who understand one thing very clearly. Scarcity creates power. Now here's where excitement kicks in. Certain 1975 no-mint mark pennies have surfaced with dramatic off-metal strikes, double dies, misaligned planchets, and transitional errors that should never have existed. Coins struck on the wrong metal, coins with doubling so sharp it looks like a shadow from history itself. When examples like these enter the market in high-grade condition, they don't get negotiated over, they get chased. Auction records and private transactions have pushed verified specimens into the stratosphere, with values reported as high as $888,000. Yes, nearly $900,000 for a penny. If that doesn't reset your perception of money, let me ask you this. When was the last time you really looked at your change? Here's the fear most people won't admit out loud. What if you already had one of these coins and didn't know it? What if it passed through your hands years ago, spent on coffee, dropped in a tip jar, dismissed as worthless because someone once told you all pennies are the same? That's the quiet danger of ignorance. And it's also why the people who win in this market aren't lucky. They're informed. They slow down. They inspect. They verify. And they act before everyone else catches on. But let's break the tension for a second because I know what some of you are thinking. Come on. If pennies were worth that much, everyone would know. That's exactly what people said about Bitcoin at $1. That's what people said about rare baseball cards, classic cars, and vintage watches before prices exploded. Mass awareness kills opportunity. Rarity thrives in silence. And the 1975 no-mint mark penny lives right in that sweet spot, widely circulated, rarely examined, and increasingly hunted by serious buyers who understand that modern U.S. era coins are one of the fastest rising alternative assets in America. Now here's where urgency enters the room. The supply of these coins will never increase. The U.S. Mint isn't making more 1975 pennies. Every year, more are damaged, cleaned improperly, or lost forever. At the same time, demand is accelerating. Wealthy collectors are moving away from volatile assets and into tangible stores of value, items they can hold, insure, and pass down. Rare coins check every box. And error coins? They sit at the very top of the hierarchy. That's why authenticated examples don't linger on the market. They disappear into private vaults, retirement portfolios, and family trusts. Act 2 of the story is where everything connects. The past mistake becomes today's opportunity. The overlooked becomes the highly sought after. And the ordinary American, someone just like you, becomes the unexpected winner by doing one simple thing most people never do. They pay attention. They learn what separates a face value penny from a six-figure artifact. They understand that condition matters, originality matters, and professional authentication is non-negotiable. This isn't gambling. This is strategy. This is how quiet wealth is built. And let's be honest for a moment. There's something deeply satisfying about beating the system with knowledge instead of noise, about finding value where others see nothing, about knowing that while the world scrolls past opportunity, you paused, looked closer, and claimed it. That feeling? That's why collectors do this. That's why investors stay in this market for decades. And that's why the 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln penny continues to command attention at the highest levels. Now we arrive at Act 3, the decision point. Because stories like this only matter if they change behavior. Somewhere in America right now, someone is unknowingly holding a coin that could redefine their financial story. It might be in a drawer. It might be in an old collection. It might even be sitting in a jar labeled spare change. The difference between regret and reward is action, inspection, verification, timing. This is not about luck. This is about awareness meeting opportunity. The market is watching. Collectors are searching. And the window is still open, but it won't stay that way forever. Ask yourself this before you move on with your day. If a single penny could be worth nearly $900,000, is it really worth ignoring the change you already own? The moment you hear the word penny, your mind probably tells you it's insignificant. Something dropped in a drawer, lost in a couch, or handed back without a second thought. And that assumption, right there, is exactly why fortunes are quietly slipping through people's fingers every single day. Because hidden among ordinary change is a 1976 D. Lincoln 1-cent coin that has stunned collectors, shocked professional dealers, and crossed auction floors at a current market value approaching $823,000. Yes, for a single penny. And before you dismiss this as impossible, ask yourself this one question. What if the most valuable asset you've never noticed is already in your home? Act 1 begins with America in 1976, a year charged with patriotic pride, economic uncertainty, and massive coin production to meet public demand. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln pennies that year, and most were entirely ordinary. But history has a habit of leaving behind quiet anomalies, and in the rush of production, rare minting errors were born. These errors weren't designed. They weren't announced. They weren't corrected. They slipped out unnoticed, entered circulation, and waited patiently for decades. Today, those same overlooked coins are among the most aggressively pursued assets in the numismatic market. The irony is almost humorous. The penny you ignored for 40 years may now be worth more than your house. If that doesn't reset your attention, nothing will. Now here's where curiosity turns into excitement. The 1976 D. Lincoln penny error is not valuable because it's old. It's valuable because it's rare, misunderstood, and nearly impossible to replace once identified. Certain error combinations, striking anomalies, and die irregularities elevate this coin into elite territory. High-level collectors don't chase these pieces casually. They compete for them. They wait years for one to surface. And when it does, the bidding isn't polite, it's aggressive, emotional, and urgent. This is the kind of demand where price becomes secondary to possession. And demand like that is what creates life-changing value. Act 2 is where realization sets in, and for many people this is the uncomfortable part, because fear enters the picture. Fear of having unknowingly spent one. Fear of having given one away. Fear of having it right now and not recognizing it. But that fear has a powerful upside. It wakes people up. It forces attention, pushes action. And the truth is, thousands of Americans are sitting on rare coins without knowing it, while professional buyers actively search estate sales, inherited collections, and even loose jars of change, hoping someone else stays unaware just a little longer. The market rewards the informed, not the lucky. Here's a pattern-breaking thought that might make you smile. Imagine explaining to your younger self that one day, the fastest way to wealth wouldn't be stocks, real estate, or crypto, but a penny. You'd probably laugh. And yet, serious collectors are laughing all the way to the bank right now. Because rare error coins operate under a different economic law. They don't follow inflation. They don't depend on interest rates. They rely on scarcity, desire, and prestige. And once a verified high-grade 1976 D error penny enters the market, it doesn't linger. It disappears into private collections, often for decades. This is where urgency quietly tightens its grip. The supply of these coins is permanently fixed. No more will ever be made. Every year, more are lost, damaged, or locked away. Meanwhile, demand keeps rising as new collectors enter the market and seasoned investors diversify into tangible assets with historical weight. That imbalance is what drives prices upward, sometimes explosively. Waiting doesn't make these coins easier to find. Waiting makes them harder and more expensive. The window of opportunity narrows while most people remain distracted by things that depreciate. Act 3 is about transformation, not just of a coin, but of perspective. This isn't about chasing fantasy. It's about recognizing value where others refuse to look. Wealthy collectors didn't become wealthy by ignoring overlooked markets. They became wealthy by seeing patterns early and acting decisively. The 1976 D. Lincoln penny error represents exactly that kind of opportunity. The small, unassuming, and underestimated until it isn't. And when verified, authenticated, and presented correctly, it commands respect, competition, and extraordinary money. Imagine the shift that happens when you move from casually owning old coins to understanding them as strategic assets. Imagine the confidence of knowing exactly what to look for, exactly who wants it, and exactly how demand works in your favor. This is how ordinary people step into extraordinary outcomes, not through luck, but through awareness. The collectors who succeed aren't the ones with the biggest collections. They're the ones who recognize significance before the crowd does. So here's the final thought, and it's meant to linger. Somewhere in America, right now, someone is holding a 1976 D. Lincoln penny error worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and has no idea. And somewhere else, a buyer is ready, waiting, and fully prepared to pay for it. The only question that matters is which side of that transaction you'll be on. Because in a world where wealth often feels out of reach, sometimes the most powerful opportunities are hiding in plain sight, quietly, patiently, and waiting for someone informed enough to notice. Most people would walk past this coin without a second thought. It looks ordinary, boring even. A 1978 Lincoln penny with a small D mint mark from Denver. The kind of coin that rattles around in cup holders, couch cushions, or old coffee cans in the garage. But here's the uncomfortable truth that makes collectors uneasy and ordinary people nervous. One version of this exact penny has been connected to valuations reaching as high as $798,000. And the scariest part? The people who owned it didn't know what they had until it was almost too late. So before you dismiss the change in your pocket, ask yourself this question. What if the smallest coin you own is quietly your largest financial blind spot? This is not a fairy tale. It's a story about precision, timing, and the hidden power of minting errors that transformed an everyday 1978 D. Lincoln cent into an object of intense demand. In Act 1, we begin with certainty, the belief that pennies are worthless. For decades, Americans have been taught to ignore them, toss them aside, or even throw them away. Pennies don't buy lifestyles. Pennies don't build wealth. Or so we thought. Because in 1978, inside the Denver Mint, a series of microscopic deviations occurred during the striking process. And those tiny deviations would later separate ordinary pennies from extraordinary ones. Now here's where things get interesting. The U.S. Mint doesn't announce errors. There's no press conference, no warning label. Errors slip out silently, mixed with millions of normal coins, released into circulation like wolves in sheep's clothing. Some 1978 D pennies were struck with dramatic off-center impressions, others with double dies so sharp they look like the coin is vibrating, and a select few with planchet and strike anomalies so rare they stop seasoned graders in their tracks. These are not flaws. In the collector world, these are accelerants. They turn copper into leverage. And let's pause for a second because this is where most people lose attention. So quick reset. Be honest. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not glanced. Looked. If you're thinking never, congratulations. You're exactly like everyone else who unknowingly spent a potential 5- or 6-figure asset on a cup of coffee. Funny how that works, right? Act 2 is where disbelief turns into excitement. Because once collectors realized what escaped the Denver Mint in 1978, demand didn't just rise, it tightened. High-grade examples with strong error characteristics began disappearing into private collections. Auction houses started whispering instead of advertising. Why? Because scarcity plus error plus condition equals pressure. And pressure creates price. The market doesn't reward common coins. It rewards anomalies that survive untouched, uncleaned, and unrecognized for decades. This is where fear quietly enters the story. Not fear of loss, but fear of ignorance. Because while the supply of these rare 1978 D error pennies is fixed forever, interest is not. Every year, more Americans turn to tangible assets. Every year, more collectors compete for fewer verified examples. And every year, more pennies are damaged, cleaned, or spent by people who never knew what to look for. Once that happens, the opportunity is gone, permanently. But here's the empowering part, and this matters. You don't need to be a professional numismatist to recognize potential. You need curiosity. You need patience. And you need to understand that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar. The Lincoln penny was designed to honor honesty and hard work. Ironically, the rarest versions reward attention and restraint. By Act 3, the story becomes personal. Because this is no longer about a coin. It's about a mindset. The people who succeed in this space aren't gamblers. They're observers. They understand that the market pays premiums for coins that combine history, error, and condition, especially when those coins come from an era most people overlook. The 1978 D Lincoln penny sits at a perfect intersection. Modern enough to exist in large numbers, old enough for true rarities to surface, and overlooked enough to still surprise the market. And yes, headline-making examples tied to values approaching $798,000 exist because they meet extreme criteria: verified error types, elite condition, and impeccable provenance. But here's what most people miss. You don't need the best in the world coin to change your financial trajectory. You need the right coin, identified early, protected correctly, and positioned wisely. That's how collections turn into capital. So before you scroll away, let this land. Somewhere in America right now, there is a 1978 Lincoln penny sitting in a drawer, a shoebox, or a forgotten roll that hasn't been checked in decades. Its owner thinks it's worth 1 cent. The market may strongly disagree, and the difference between those two realities is knowledge. History doesn't reward the loudest people. It rewards the prepared. And in the world of rare coins, preparation starts with attention. Because sometimes the smallest detail, the slight doubling of a letter, the subtle shift of a strike, the quiet D beneath Lincoln's shoulder, is the difference between spare change and a life-altering asset. So the next time you hear a penny hit the table, don't hear noise. Hear possibility. Because wealth doesn't always come in stacks. Sometimes it comes quietly, 1 cent at a time. Picture this for a second. Somewhere in your home, maybe in a dusty jar, an old wallet, or a coffee can that hasn't been opened in years. There's a single brown penny quietly waiting. It looks ordinary, almost boring. And yet, what if I told you that this exact type of coin has shocked seasoned collectors, rewritten auction records, and ignited bidding wars that climb toward $932,000? Sounds impossible, right? That doubt you're feeling right now, that's exactly why most fortunes stay hidden in plain sight. This story begins in 1979, a year most people remember for gas lines and disco fading out, not for minting a future six-figure treasure. The Denver Mint struck millions of Lincoln cents that year, and nearly all of them entered circulation unnoticed. But history has a strange habit of rewarding imperfections. Somewhere along the production line, a small group of 1979 Lincoln pennies escaped with rare minting errors, mistakes so subtle that only the trained eye or the curious mind would ever catch them. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many of these coins were spent, dropped, or stored away by people who had no idea what they were holding. Maybe someone just like you. Now let's pause for a quick reality check. Be honest, when was the last time you really looked at a penny? Not glanced at it, but actually inspected it. If your answer is never or a long time ago, congratulations, you're normal. That's also why collectors quietly smile when they hear that. Because fear lives right there in that moment. Fear that the opportunity already passed. Fear that the coin was spent on coffee. Fear that luck always belongs to someone else. But excitement lives there too, because every year new discoveries prove that these coins are still out there. The 1979 Lincoln penny becomes extraordinary when a specific error appears: misaligned strikes, double details, or planchet anomalies that should never have made it past quality control. These aren't cosmetic flaws. These are production accidents that transform pocket change into high-demand collectibles. When authenticated and preserved in high condition, examples like these have ignited fierce competition among elite collectors who understand one simple rule: rarity plus demand equals serious money, and demand is exactly what's driving this market right now. As traditional investments wobble and inflation eats away at savings, tangible assets have taken center stage. Rare coins, especially US error cents with documented scarcity, are being hunted aggressively. Think about that for a moment. While most people chase trends, the smart money chases history. And history, unlike hype, can't be recreated. Here's where the story shifts. This isn't just about a coin, it's about timing. Collectors who once focused only on gold and silver are now zeroing in on error pennies because supply is finite and shrinking. Every time one is lost, damaged, or overlooked, the remaining examples become more valuable. It's almost unfair. Almost. And if you're wondering, why would anyone pay nearly $1 million for a penny? The answer is simple. Because someone else is willing to pay even more tomorrow. Let's inject a little humor before we go further. If Lincoln knew his face would one day be worth more than a luxury house, he probably would have smiled on that coin. Jokes aside, this is the exact moment where curiosity turns into urgency. The market doesn't wait. It rewards those who act while others hesitate. And the people winning in this space aren't magicians or insiders. They're everyday Americans who decided to look twice at what they already owned. As we move deeper into this story, understand this: wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer. The 1979 penny represents something bigger than money. It represents leverage, turning knowledge into opportunity. Those who recognized similar coins years ago didn't wait for permission. They authenticated, protected, and positioned their finds in front of the right buyers. And when bidding opened, the results spoke for themselves. Now imagine the emotional shift when a simple coin becomes a life-changing asset. Excitement replaces doubt. Confidence replaces hesitation. Suddenly, the idea of financial freedom doesn't feel abstract. It feels possible. And that feeling is addictive because once you realize value can hide in plain sight, you start seeing opportunity everywhere. This is the final act, and it's the most important one. Right now, attention around rare Lincoln cents is surging. Auction houses, private collectors, and investors are actively searching for the next standout piece. The window is open, but it won't stay that way forever. Markets mature. Stories get written. Prices move. The only question left is whether you'll be someone who watched from the sidelines or someone who acted when the signal was cleared. So here's the quiet challenge. The next time you see a penny, don't dismiss it. Respect it. Inspect it. Because history has already proven that one small decision, one moment of curiosity, can separate ordinary from extraordinary. And in the world of rare coins, the difference between a penny and a fortune is often nothing more than paying attention. Somewhere in America right now, a single copper-colored coin is sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, or an old coffee can, completely ignored. It doesn't shine. It doesn't look special. And yet, collectors have paid as much as $955,000 for one just like it. Today, we're talking about the 1982 Lincoln 1-cent penny, a coin from a year that quietly changed U.S. history and created one of the most powerful penny errors ever discovered. And here's the uncomfortable question you might want to ask yourself before this video ends. What if the most valuable thing you own isn't in your bank account, but in your pocket? Stay with me because what you're about to hear could completely change how you see spare change forever. Act 1 begins in 1982, a year most people remember for gas prices, cassette tapes, and the rise of home computers. But behind the scenes, the U.S. Mint was under pressure. Copper prices were rising fast, and the Mint made a historic decision. Pennies would no longer be made primarily of copper. Instead, they would shift to zinc cores with a thin copper coating. Sounds simple, right? Except transitions are messy, and when systems change, mistakes happen. The Denver Mint, marked with a small but powerful D, was producing millions of pennies during this chaotic shift. Different metal compositions, different weights, different dyes, all moving at once. And that is exactly how rare errors are born. Think of it like a factory changing engines while the car is still driving down the highway. Something is bound to slip through. Now here's where the excitement kicks in. In 1982, there wasn't just one penny. There were multiple varieties, different weights, different metals, and subtle differences almost no one noticed at the time. But collectors noticed later. One specific 1982 Lincoln cent error, produced on the wrong planchet during this transition, became legendary. Wrong metal, wrong weight, right year, right mint, and almost impossible to replicate. When authenticated and preserved in top condition, examples of this error have entered the market with values reaching up to $955,000, not because of hype, but because demand crushed supply. Let me pause you right there. How many pennies do you think most people check before tossing them aside? Exactly. That's the fear. The fear that something life-changing has already passed through your hands without you ever realizing it. Act 2 is about discovery, and this is where urgency lives. The people who found these coins weren't professional treasure hunters. They were everyday Americans, retirees sorting jars, inherited collections opened years later, people who almost spent them on coffee. One collector famously said, half-jokingly, "I was one bad vending machine away from losing my retirement." That's the pattern interrupt right there, because it forces you to stop and think. If a machine can swallow nearly $1 million without blinking, what else are we overlooking in our daily routines? The 1982 D-era penny didn't become valuable overnight. It became valuable because collectors realized how few survived, how difficult they are to authenticate, and how critical that Denver Mint mark is. When demand from high-end collectors surged, prices followed, and they didn't creep upward, they jumped. And here's the authority piece most people miss. Coin markets don't reward common knowledge. They reward timing, scarcity, and verified rarity. The 1982 D-era penny sits at the intersection of all three. Major collectors aren't hunting these coins because they're nostalgic. They're hunting them because elite examples are vanishing into private vaults, long-term portfolios, and legacy collections. Once that happens, supply tightens even more. That's why these coins are spoken about in whispers at auctions and why public sales cause shockwaves when they surface. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you heard about something becoming less valuable when rich people stopped selling it? Act 3 is about decision, and this is where your audience leans forward. Because whether you're 30 or 65, wealth isn't just about income. It's about awareness. It's about knowing what others overlook. Right now, thousands of 1982 pennies sit untouched across the country. Most are ordinary, some are not. And the difference between pocket change and a life-changing asset can come down to a scale, a mint mark, and the courage to check. Imagine discovering that a coin you've owned for decades suddenly commands attention from top collectors, professional graders, and serious buyers. That's not fantasy. That's how real numismatic wealth is created. Let me ask you something and be honest with yourself. If there was even a small chance that something you already owned could change your financial future, would you want to know? Because the people who act first don't need luck later. The 1982 D. Lincoln penny era isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about recognizing value before the window closes. Markets reward the prepared, and history rewards the curious. Every year, fewer of these coins remain unexamined. Every year, more disappear into collections that will never sell again. And every year, the price conversation shifts higher, not lower. So before you dismiss this as just another penny story, remember this: wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar, waiting for someone who knows what to listen for. The question isn't whether valuable coins still exist. The question is whether you'll look before someone else does. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America right now, a small copper coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, or maybe even your pocket. It looks ordinary, forgettable, almost invisible. And yet, this single 1995 Lincoln penny, with no mint mark, has stunned collectors, shocked professional graders, and commanded a staggering market value of up to $777,000. That's right. A coin most people would toss aside without a second glance could be the silent key to generational wealth. So before you scroll, before you dismiss this, ask yourself one dangerous question. What if you already own it and don't even know it? This is not a fantasy, and this is not hype. This is how wealth often hides in plain sight. History shows us that the biggest financial surprises don't always arrive wrapped in gold bars or stock certificates. Sometimes, they arrive as humble pennies, misunderstood, overlooked, and massively undervalued until the right eyes recognize them. The 1995 no mint mark Lincoln cent is one of those rare moments in American coinage where timing, error, and demand collide in a way that can change lives. And the most shocking part? Millions of people have handled this coin, yet only a few realized what they were holding. Let's step into Act 1, the setup where everything seems ordinary. The year is 1995. The U.S. Mint is producing millions of Lincoln pennies. Business as usual. No headlines, no alarms, no warnings. But behind the scenes, subtle minting anomalies begin to slip through quality control. Coins struck without a mint mark. Coins carrying microscopic errors invisible to the untrained eye. Coins that should never have entered circulation. And yet they did. They passed through hands, stores, banks, and gas stations unnoticed. Think about that. While people were arguing about stocks and interest rates, rare assets were quietly being spent for 1 cent. Now here's where fear creeps in. Because most people miss wealth not because it doesn't exist, but because they don't know where to look. How many pennies have you handled in your lifetime? Thousands? Tens of thousands? And how many did you actually examine? Exactly. That realization alone should make you pause. Because collectors today are not guessing anymore. They are hunting. And when a verified 1995 no-mint mark penny with the right error characteristics appears, the demand is immediate, aggressive, and global. Act 2 is where the tension rises, and this is where excitement kicks in. The 1995 Lincoln penny is already significant, but certain error variations push it into elite territory. We're talking about coins with doubling anomalies, strike irregularities, die errors that create unique visual signatures, and production flaws that cannot be duplicated. These are not damaged coins. These are mint-born errors, the holy grail of serious numismatics. Once authenticated and graded, these coins are no longer pennies. They become assets, auction-level, investment-grade artifacts with a limited and shrinking supply. And here's a quick pattern interrupt. Be honest for a second. If someone offered you $777,000 for something you already own and don't use, would you laugh? Or would you run to check your drawer? Exactly. That's the power of awareness. Because while most people are distracted by noise, informed collectors are quietly positioning themselves ahead of the curve. The market doesn't reward the loudest voice, it rewards the prepared. What makes this moment urgent is not just the value, it's the timing. We are living in an era where tangible assets are regaining dominance. Rare coins are no longer just hobbies for retirees. They are strategic wealth vehicles. Auction houses are reporting stronger competition, private collectors are paying premiums, and high-net-worth buyers are actively searching for verified error coins that others overlooked decades ago. Once these coins are pulled from circulation, they don't come back. Every year that passes reduces availability and increases pressure on price. Now, Act 3, the payoff where everything connects. This is where inspiration meets authority. The people who benefit from opportunities like this are not gamblers. They are not lucky. They are decisive. They understand that wealth favors those who act before the crowd catches on. The 1995 no-mint mark Lincoln penny represents more than money. It represents awareness, patience, and the courage to look twice when everyone else looks away. Picture this scenario. You take 10 minutes to inspect your pennies. You notice something unusual. You send it for professional evaluation. Weeks later, confirmation arrives. What was once pocket change becomes a life-altering asset. Debt disappears. Options expand. Security replaces uncertainty. And suddenly, the phrase "it's just a penny" no longer applies to your life. That transformation begins with a single decision. To pay attention. Here's another quick reset. What's riskier? Spending a few minutes checking what you already own? Or ignoring the possibility that a six-figure asset slipped through your hands? The answer is obvious. Opportunity doesn't knock loudly. Sometimes it whispers in copper tones and waits to see who's listening. The demand for rare U.S. error pennies is not slowing down. It's accelerating. As more people learn, competition increases, and prices respond accordingly. That's how markets work. Early awareness creates advantage. Late awareness creates regret. And the smartest move has always been the same. Position yourself before certainty becomes common knowledge. So if you're someone who values independence, financial confidence, and the idea that wealth doesn't always come from working harder but from seeing smarter, this is your moment. The 1995 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is not about chance. It's about recognition. About understanding that sometimes, the smallest things carry the biggest futures. Before you move on with your day, remember this. The difference between those who watch opportunities pass and those who capitalize on them is often just one choice. One look. One moment of curiosity. Check your pennies. Respect their history. And don't underestimate what's been hiding in plain sight all along. Because for the prepared, even a single cent can be worth a fortune. Imagine this for a moment. A single penny. 1 cent sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, or the cup holder of your car. You've ignored it 1,000 times because it looks ordinary. But what if I told you that one specific Lincoln penny from 2017, struck at the Denver Mint, has quietly crossed conversations at values approaching $765,000? Not because it's gold. Not because it's old. but because it's rare in a way most people never think to look for. And here's the uncomfortable question that should stop you cold right now. What if you already owned it and never knew? This is the story of the 2017 D Lincoln penny error, a modern coin that shattered expectations and rewrote the rules of what valuable really means. Most people believe big money only lives in ancient coins, dusty collections, or museum cases. That belief has cost everyday Americans millions. And tonight, I don't want you to be one of them. Because the truth is, modern coins can be the most dangerous kind of opportunity, the kind that hides in plain sight. The kind that slips through your fingers simply because you didn't know what to look for. And yes, it's okay if you're thinking, a penny from 2017? Really? That skepticism is exactly why so few people ever catch these before it's too late. Act 1 begins with confidence. In 2017, the U.S. Mint produced billions of Lincoln pennies. The Denver Mint alone released massive quantities marked with that tiny D under the date. To the untrained eye, they all look the same. That's where the trap is. Because buried inside those ordinary production runs were error coins created during high-speed minting, errors so subtle, so unexpected, that most slipped straight into circulation unnoticed. No alarms, no announcements, just silent rarity moving through everyday hands. If you've ever received change at a grocery store, there's a moment, however small, where destiny brushed past you. Now here's where excitement kicks in. Certain 2017 D Lincoln pennies have surfaced with dramatic minting anomalies. Misaligned dies, double design elements, off-center strikes, and unusual planchet errors that should never have left the mint. These are not damages from circulation. These are birthmarks. And in the coin world, birthmarks create legends. Collectors don't chase age alone. They chase mistakes that can never be repeated. When a genuine mint error is confirmed, demand doesn't rise slowly. It explodes. 1 minute it's a penny. The next minute it's the most wanted coin in the room. Let me ask you something, quick mental reset. If someone offered you a single cent and told you it could buy a house, would you even believe them? Most people laugh. That laugh has cost fortunes. And the irony? The loudest skeptics are usually the ones who already had the opportunity and spent it without a second glance. Humor aside, this is where fear quietly enters the picture. Fear of missing out. Fear of realizing years from now that you once held something extraordinary and let it go for nothing. Because once these error pennies are identified and locked into private collections, they don't come back to the market easily. Scarcity tightens, prices harden, doors close. Act 2 is about awakening. When high-grade examples of rare 2017 D error pennies began circulating through elite collector channels, attention shifted fast. Authentication services stepped in. Serious money followed. Discussions of valuations reaching as high as $765,000 didn't come from hype alone. They came from scarcity colliding with obsession. Collectors compete not emotionally, but strategically. They understand something most people don't. Modern error coins are a shrinking opportunity. Every year that passes, more are discovered, certified, and removed from circulation forever. That means time is not neutral. Time is expensive. And here's a pattern interrupt you didn't expect. Your spare change might be working harder than your savings account ever did. Strange thought, right? But unlike traditional investments, this opportunity doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't care about interest rates or market crashes. It just waits to be noticed. The people who win aren't lucky. They're informed. They check dates. They examine mint marks. They understand that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a coin jar. Act 3 is where urgency takes over. Right now, thousands of 2017 D Lincoln pennies still sit in circulation, unexamined, unprotected, undervalued. But not for long. Awareness is rising. Collectors are actively hunting. Dealers are paying premiums just to get first access. Once mainstream attention catches up, the easy window closes. And when that happens, regret becomes the most expensive emotion of all. This is not about fantasy. This is about positioning yourself ahead of the crowd, while opportunity is still quiet enough to hear. Picture the confidence of knowing you looked when others didn't. The satisfaction of understanding value before the headlines do. The possibility very real that something you already own could elevate your financial story in ways you never planned. That's how wealth changes lives, not through miracles, but through moments of awareness acted on decisively. The 2017 D. Lincoln penny error is more than a coin. It's a reminder that big money doesn't always come wrapped in gold. Sometimes it comes disguised as pocket change, waiting for someone smart enough to pay attention to us. So tonight, don't dismiss the ordinary. Don't underestimate the modern. And don't assume the opportunity has already passed. Because history doesn't just belong to those who collect it, it belongs to those who recognize it in time. And the next time a penny crosses your palm, you'll never look at it the same way again.